Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto traveled with Jiraiya, bouncing from place to place and Naruto having to drag Jiraiya away from the hot springs after he got the shit beaten out of him by pissed off females. Naruto had taken to calling Jiraiya by the affectionate title of pervert, while he wanted Naruto to call him Jiraiya, which Naruto would continue calling him pervert. Soon the pair split up as a girl flirted with Jiraiya, leading him to brush off Naruto, who shook his head and made his way to the hotel, while two men in black cloaks with red clouds on them were watching him from a distance. Naruto arrived at the hotel room, clocked in, went into his destined bedroom and laid on his bed, and soon the sound of knocking on the door sounded out the minute he was going to sleep. Naruto. Kyuubi said. I know, Kyuubi, I know. Naruto thought back. He then walked towards the door, opened it and saw two men. The shorter one had red eyes with commas in them and the taller one had a sword nearly the same size he was, and his skin was blue with bloodshot eyes. The three ninjas stared at each other for a while until Naruto broke the silence and said, "Look, I don't know who you are, but I don't care. I'm not interested in what you are selling, please go home." And with that Naruto shut the door with a firm slam. Kisame looks at his partner and said, "Did that just happen?" Itachi sighed and said, "Apparently, bust down the door." The shark-like man smirked and was prepared to ram down the door until Itachi pulled him away and a blast of chakra-enhanced wind destroyed where they just were standing moments ago. Naruto walked into the hallway to see the two men down the hall, a few feet away from where the attack destroyed the opposite wall. Kisame whistled at the destruction while Itachi was thinking that this was not the energetic blonde that he watched over when he was still in the ABNU. This one was too cold and focused, along with his eyes. They are much darker than when he left. So, what happened while I was away to change the blonde like this? He thought to himself. Itachi Uchiha, slaughterer of the Uchiha clan and Kisame Hoshigaki, the monster of the hidden mist, Naruto said, in monotone. So, the little brat knows our names, Kisame said, intrigued. Itachi said, "Naruto-kun, please come with us." "Sorry, Itachi, but I can't do that." Naruto shook his head. "Then can I cut off his legs, Itachi?" "He won't need them," Kisame grinned. Itachi just glanced at him from the corner of his eye until someone interrupted their meeting. "Itachi!" Sasuke yelled, arriving panting at the scene, glaring at his brother with so much hate. Kisame smirked. "My Itachi, a reunion." Naruto snorted. "Tch, Ing bastard has the worst timing." "Little brother," Itachi said in monotone. "I have been strengthening my hate for this day and I will finally kill you." He snarled, covering his entire hand in lightning. He dragged his arm through the wall, destroying it, so he could land a hit on Itachi. However, the elder man easily caught Sasuke's wrist, breaking it, disabling the lightning jutsu. Itachi then slammed him against the wall with spider cracks surrounding Sasuke's body. "You are still too weak, little brother. Not enough hate." However, before Itachi could do anything, Naruto decides to infer, causing Itachi to drop Sasuke and dodged Kisame's strike with his massive sword. Naruto rushed towards Sasuke, grabbing him by his hair and made to escape through the wall. "Dobi, let me go," Sasuke snarled, trying to pry Naruto's ironclad grip out of his hair. Naruto didn't bother responding and ran to get as much space as he could between the two S-ranked ninjas and himself. However, that plan was futile. The two S-ranked missing ninjas stood in front of him, Kisame with an interested and amused look while Itachi still had his emotionless face on. "Dobi, you better let me go or else," Sasuke said, renewing his struggling after seeing his brother in front of him. Naruto smashed a knee into Sasuke's chest, making him cough and hack. "Shut it, Uchiha. This is not the time for you pinning after your brothers. Your brother is an S-ranked missing ninja who slaughtered his entire clan and you in pathetic arrogance decided to attack him with a frontal attack of an assassination jutsu that should only be used on a restrained target." Kisame whistled before laughing. Your brother is getting hisput on a plate, Itachi. Itachi simply closed his eyes and silently sighed at Sasuke's behavior. Sasuke finally wrenched himself free of Naruto's grip, sending a scalding glare towards the blonde who returned it with his own cold gaze. Stay the hell out of my way, Dobi. Sasuke snarled, glaring him before focusing on Itachi. Is Dobi all you can say? Naruto snapped before moving out of the way of Kisami's sword strike. Enough talking, kid. Now you have to entertain me for a while, if you can last long enough. Naruto snarled and put himself into a taijutsu position as he allowed his chakra to flow out as Sasuke faced to his older brother. Kisame swings his sword, bringing it down on the tiled roof with a smashing force that made pieces of tile fly everywhere. However, a blood-curdling scream came from Sasuke, and it was Itachi holding his younger brother by his broken wrist, and he just finished using his bloodline technique called Tsukuyomi on him, making him relive the slaughter of his clan. Itachi threw Sasuke away, to which he landed on the hard ground below them and focused his attention on the armed Kyuubi container, but before the two Akatsuki members to fight to capture Naruto, Jiraiya enters the fray. The great Jiraiya has arrived, he screamed, standing between the two Akatsuki members and Naruto. Pervert, what took you so long? Naruto said, plainly, nearly causing the Toad Sage to face fault. Let's us go, Kisame, Itachi said, before disappearing with the disappointed missing mist ninja in tow, leaving Naruto and Jiraiya alone on the rooftops. Like I said, dynamic entry. A scream shouted to the heavens. Jiraiya was then kicked off the roof, and Guy is standing tall and proud, and Naruto could only slightly smile at and say, 8 of 10, Guy-san. However, you can make better progress by aiming at pain spots of either the throat or the center of the forehead, he said, clapping his hands. Guy looked at the down Sannin and then looked at Naruto, said, I messed up, haven't I? He said, scratching his head. Naruto nodded his head, and soon Jiraiya was back up again and conversed with Guy, who he first berated him for kicking him, while Guy defended that he used the glint from his ninja headband to direct his kick. Guy then took Sasuke back to Konoha, and Naruto shook his head at Sasuke's stubbornness. Jiraiya told him that he found Tsunade, and they made their way to the bar. Tsunade was with her apprentice Shizune with her pig Tun eating dinner, and Jiraiya walks towards their table with Naruto in tow. Jiraiya, why are you here? Tsunade said as Jiraiya and Naruto scooted into the booth. We are here because we need you to become the 5th Hokage of Leaves, Jiraiya stated. Not happening, she stated firmly. Tsunade, come on, he said. No, Tsunade said, about to leave, before Naruto cut in. Can you at least visit the old man? Naruto said, causing her to stop in her tracks. Old man? Shizune asked. The 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Tsunade. He's on his last leg from protecting the village by using a jutsu that shredded Orochimaru's arms, Jiraiya said. The village still stands? Shizune asked. Yes, it still stands, Naruto replied. She shook her head and said, no, I won't go back. Tsunade, you have to. It's your home, you have to protect it. He begged. Jiraiya, I will not do it. Being Hokage is a fool's dream, and everyone who aimed for that dream is dead, and that damn village took all of my family away from me, and you expect me to come back and let it? No way in hell, she spat. Jiraiya was trying to convince her, but Tsunade wouldn't hear any of it, but then her eyes caught Naruto's. They looked cold and dead looking, and it ran shudders down her spine. Naruto just shook his head and said, pervert, scoot over. The mission is a failure. Naruto. Jiraiya said, no, pervert. It seems that Danzo will be the Hokage this time, considering that the prime candidate is too chicken to go on the stand. Who the air you calling a chicken, brat? Tsunade said, moving until she was nose to nose with the younger boy, who looks back at her with unflinching eyes. I am, because all I see is a pathetic, pale imitation of a woman that used to crumble mountains, and the one woman who destroyed the common stereotype of a woman couldn't be stronger than a man. That, and the person who I thought was my godmother, He trailed off in a whisper, which she heard causing her to freeze in place. Naruto turns to Jiraiya and said, "Pervert, I will be at the hotel to pack my things." He moves away from the table and Tsunade stood up to run towards the boy yelling for him to wait, but he flashed away before she could grab him. Tsunade turns back and sits back down in the booth as Jiraiya swallows down a shot of sake as she glares at him for an explanation. He sighed and said, I know you want to know, but I don't. You don't know. What the hell was going on with him? And, is he really? Tsunade trailed off. A sharp nod from Jiraiya gave her the answer, damn it Jiraiya, why didn't you tell me? She yelled, slamming her fist on the table. Did you really think you could have raised a baby in your condition? You went drinking and gambling nearly every day for 6 years after that day. He snapped back, not in the mood to play the blame game. And what about you? Tsunade said, still miffed. I had my spy network to run and I couldn't take care of him without a bunch of red flags popping all over the elemental nations and people questioning why I have a baby who looks like you know who, he said, sadly. Tsunade sighed and she looked like she was going to be ill and Jiraiya stood up and said, you don't have to come back, I won't make you. However, if you join up with Orochimaru, I swear to Kami I will end you, he finished darkly, causing her to gulp. He then left the bar, leaving Tsunade alone with her thoughts with Shizune at her side. She touched her teacher's arm but Tsunade just shook her head. Tsunade paid for her meal and told Shizune to go to Jiraiya's hotel as she grabbed the sake bottle. As she walked outside and looked at the sky and then down at the bottle in her hand and for the first time in a long time, she dumped the rest of her half-empty bottle of sake on the ground and threw away the bottle. She then went on a walk, letting her feet take her away until she found Naruto meditating underneath the shadow of a tree. Tsunade, I know you are there, come out, he said, not moving from his spot. She stands a few feet away from him and he asks a simple question. Why didn't you come for me? He asked, not opening his eyes. I was told you were dead. She said, softly. That's it. Naruto said, plainly. No, I saw you're dead, unmoving corpse and everything. I truly thought you were dead and I tried every healing spell that I knew and you wouldn't wake up and I just couldn't take it anymore and I left the village when they confirmed your death. Kyuubi. She's not lying, her heart is still normal and I can feel genuine sadness. She's telling the truth. Naruto nodded in acceptance of her answer as she took a seat in front of him. Other than Hiruzen, what else has been going on in the Leaf Village? Naruto looked up and said, Kushina is alive. Your mother is alive, Tsunade said, shocked out of her wits. Naruto snarled and a tree sideways from them, exploded into ashes and flames licked at the remains, shocking the slug Sanin. That bitch is not my mother. He spat out with pure venom. Tsunade was shocked, but before she could defend the woman she thought as a daughter, Naruto crossed the few feet between him and her and said, I'm going to show you what she did to me and when it is finished. You tell me if you can still think of her as a mother after that. Naruto placed his fingers at her temples and said, memory hell viewing technique. Before everything surrounding Tsunade faded to black. Okami. Sasuke confronts his brother, Bleach version, Charalat Chulhorn. Itachi. Sasuke yelled, arriving panting at the scene, glaring at his brother so full of hate. Kisame smirked, my Itachi a reunion. Naruto snorted, TCH, Ing bastard has the worst timing. Little brother, Itachi said in monotone. I have been strengthening my hate for this day and I will finally kill you. He snarled. This special technique will finally end you. Sasuke said, pulling out a sword from behind his back. Sasuke held it with 2 hands and said, Sparkle, Queen of Roses. A plume of smoke appeared, covering the entire hallway as Naruto blew the smoke away from his face and when the smoke cleared, Naruto had to bite his tongue to keep his jaw from hitting the floor. Kyuubi who was watching from behind his eyes was choking and spluttering inside his head. Itachi's eyes were popping out of his skull and Kisame was 1 minute away from laughing histo death. Sasuke. Ing. Uchiha. was wearing a white crop top with extended wing-like shoulder pads and a short pink cape attached to the back. He has white underwear with extended wings at the hips and a pink flowing mini skirt. He has large, white, disc-like bracelets on his ankles and wrists, and he wears heeled shoes. His pubic hair is replaced by a pink heart outline with a smaller heart above it, and he completes the outfit with a tiara with horns. Kisame couldn't hold it in anymore and fell on the floor with cackling laughter, and Kyubi followed soon afterward, laughing inside her seal. Naruto let out a shuddering breath that sounded like a laugh while Itachi slowly shook his head and wondered if he could just put his clan out of his misery and just kill him and himself for the shame. Naruto interrupted his train of thought by saying, "Damn it, Sasuke. Did Orochimaru having your black cherry you up so badly?" Causing Sasuke to blush and then to glare at Naruto, who shrugged his shoulders and wanted to watch how the scene played out between brothers, and so he leaned against the doorway waiting for the first brother to attack. Oh, that how it got to this point. Inward shudder, at least it wasn't Danzo. I would tear his head off myself if he was taught by Danzo, Itachi sighed. Shut up, Dobi. With this power, I can finally kill Itachi. Sasuke, apparently we need to have that talk we missed when I found you messing around in mother's clothes and makeup, Itachi said, softly as he cracked his knuckles and his killing intent leaking out slowly. Sasuke put his hands in a heart shape and yelled out, "Beautiful Sasuke Uchiha's final holy wonderful pretty super magnum YY glamorous Sero." A pink heart-shaped blast came from Sasuke's hands, causing Itachi and Naruto to move away from the attack, but Kisame was too slow and he was caught in the attack. When the attack finished, Kisame was baked to hell and Naruto whistled at Sasuke's fired attack. Not bad, Uchiha, Naruto said, looking at the baked remains of the missing mist ninja. Itachi, on the other hand, went to have that talk with his brother, ergo beating the shit out of him and then forcing him through the Tsukuyomi, and then had to flee when Jiraiya arrived, taking the charred remains of his partner with him, leaving the smell of baked fish in the hallway. Naruto. What is it, pervert? Why is the hallway destroyed and smell like baked fish? Itachi and his partner came to kidnap me, but Sasuke in his infinite wisdom decided to blast a pink attack that destroyed the hallway and baked one of the attackers to hell, Naruto said, pointing at the downed Uchiha. Naruto was kicking rocks as the glares, sneers, rude and downright vile comments of Naruto being a demon and how he should just die washed over the small boy, and he just kept his head down and trying to move away from public view without getting another beating. He walked towards the edge of the village out of the way of the civilians, and he was about to make his way back to his apartment until he saw a fiery red-headed woman, and his curiosity led him to watch her from a distance. After 2 days of watching her, he decided to take a chance, and if she was like the rest of the villagers he would never bother her again. After all, the worst of anything happening would be him getting another beating, which unfortunately was something he was well accustomed to. Naruto Uzumaki had no idea how much his life would change after meeting the red-headed woman. Naruto spent the next days watching her before gathering up the courage to go up to her in private, and she noticed him right away. She had her eye on him ever since she returned to the village and would enjoy the reports of the demon's suffering, and she hated him for trying to look like her late husband Minato Namikaze. Kushina didn't know why she allowed the demon wearing the skin of her late son to come anywhere near her or even watch her. All she wanted to do was to tear those traitorous eyes out of the demon's head. However, when he came up to her and introduced himself, it wasn't the boisterous manner she was expecting as she watched him exclaim loudly all over the village, but softly, almost to that of a kitten. "Hello," he said, eliminating the awkward silence. "Hello," Kushina replied. "Are you new here?" Naruto said, not really knowing where to start the conversation. "No, I have lived here and I have a family," she replied, plainly. "Oh," he said, looking disheartened, "I'm sorry for bothering your quiet time." "Wait, what is your name?" she asked. My name," he stuttered. Kushina nodded once and he said, "Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto. Son," she said in shock. "SS son," he said, in shock. She nodded and he hugged her and she slowly hugged him back, but he noticed out of the corner of his eye that she may have had a smile on her face, but her eyes were so filled with malice would kill a lesser man. However, Naruto didn't want to believe her malice was focused on him and her hug was extremely crushing as if she was trying to make him shit out his organs almost to the likeness of toothpaste. Naruto was bouncing around in excitement and said, I have a mother. I have a mother. I can't believe it, but, why did you leave me? He said with utter sadness, looking at the red-headed woman. Kushina said, I was hiding, Naruto-kun. Hiding? Naruto questioned. Yes, you see there are bad men who want me dead, she smiled sadly. They want to kill you? Naruto asked shocked. She nodded and said, I had to go into hiding and there were consequences when you born and it was during the Kyuubi attack and your father was killed and someone put a hit on me and I hide to hide you so you wouldn't be killed. Naruto teared up and said, is the guy dead? He didn't hurt you did he? No, but he is in hiding in order to kill both you and me. She said, softly, so I can't be with you, he stated with his head down. Well, she said, looking away from him. What is it? Naruto asked. I think since it has been years after their first attack, you can stay with me, she said, looking back at Naruto. I can live with you. Really? Naruto said, his eyes bright with hope. She nodded at the hope-filled boy. Yes. I can't wait to tell the old man. He smiled. Who is the old man? She asked. The third Hokage. Why? Do you know him? He asked her, to which she slightly flinched. She stalled for a bit until she said, you can't tell him about me. What? Why not? Naruto said, looking surprised. Because of the dangerous man, remember? She gently reminded him. Naruto looked down in shame because he didn't want his mother to get hurt. Okay, I won't tell him, only until you feel ready to tell him. However, I don't know your name. My name is Kushina Uzumaki. It's nice to meet you Naruto-kun. She smiled and she took him to her home where the Uzumaki clan is still alive and thriving. Then everything faded to black and Tsunade was thrust into another memory of Naruto's beating under disguise of training and helping. Naruto was kicked halfway across the training ground and he slowly got up, wincing as his stomach violently refused to his action of movement. Don't tell me that's all you have. A voice of a redhead teen boy said, glaring at Naruto. No, I am not. Good, I have much more to try on you, he smiled before attacking Naruto. Tsunade watched as Naruto forced to take beating after beating under the disguise of training and helping people with sparring, and was told to not fight back and it was only because of his advanced healing due to both the Kyuubi and his Uzumaki genes that Naruto was still alive and continued this treatment for several years day after day. Naruto constantly had to wear bandages so whenever he visited the Hokage, he could just say it was from a beating from the mobs and he accepted it, even though Hiruzen wanted to know what made the tri-whiskered boy so happy he looked like the sun incarnate. Naruto would just reply that it was a secret and he would tell him when he was ready and he would accept. Waiting on Kushina hand and foot. Tsunade is then shown Naruto being worked to the bone, working to please his mother, doing anything and everything she asked because she would give compliments here and there and Tsunade saw those compliments meant the sun and moon to the little boy. He would do anything to get his mother's approval and Kushina used that to her advantage and had her clan members use that as well. How she wanted her meals. If it wasn't perfect then she would dump it on Naruto's head and say do it again and Naruto would get started it on it, while clan members who caught the scene laughed as Naruto kept up his fake smile as if to convince himself that he was happy. Kushina ordered him to polish the floors, cook all the meals under the supervision the strict chef, clean the bedrooms, and be Kushina's personal caretaker. Brushing her hair and running her baths, setting and ironing her clothes just to name a few. Naruto would not give up to get his mother's love and respect, though deep down inside he felt something very bad was coming as days kept passing by more and more of his clan members didn't even try to hide their malice for him and they would sneer and bark orders and compliments from Kushina were getting spare and they backhand at best and downright insulting at the worst. The little boy didn't want to see the negativity and ignored it because of his dream of finally having a family as he kept repeating, "It will get better. You should be grateful. You have a mother that is here to take care of you. Bear with it. They are family." Those statements hit Tsunade with the likeness of a wet fish and it made her feel sick, and the slug sage didn't know how much worse it could get as she was thrust into another memory, and this one shocked her out of her wits. It was Junko Uzumaki. Meeting Junko, the strawberry blonde-haired woman, standing at the same height as Kushina. However, her fishnet shirt was A versus neck, showing her cleavage with a scarlet skirt and knee-high black boots, chakra-enhanced fingerless gloves with black nails. Her heart-shaped face, her pouty lips pulled in her usual large smile, button nose with her usual sky-blue eyes. Tsunade could only look in shock as Naruto chatted with the renowned sadist who exiled herself of the Uzumaki clan and created her own with the reverse symbol of the Uzumaki tattooed on her, symboling that she is a Yato. She watched Naruto's memory as he first saw Junko. He just finished wiping down the living room and he was startled when Junko kicked open the door and her eyes immediately caught with Naruto's, and they stared at each other in silence until Naruto caught on that she was bleeding. He rushed up to her and asked, "Are you okay? I don't think I've seen you before. What's your name?" he said. His voice was soft and pleasant, and much to Tsunade's shock, Junko allowed him to lead her to the bathroom. Tsunade wondered what the hell was Junko planning with Naruto, but she didn't do anything to the boy. Naruto just cleaned and dressed her wounds, even though he didn't need to do it considering the Uzumaki longevity. He talked to her and she would reply with a simple yes or no and shake her head at certain points. When he finished, he told Junko that, "Your stomach will be a bit sore, so I suggest you take it easy for a bit." After saying his piece and goodbye, he left the room, leaving an intrigued Junko staring after the blonde boy. Soon, their meeting was heard by Kushina, who pulled Naruto aside roughly and told him in explicit terms that Junko was a terrible person and she didn't want to hear anything about her being near him or vice versa, or there would be hell to pay. Naruto shook his head as fear welled up in his throat as he heeded his mother's advice. While she was near the compound, Naruto continued to visit Junko on her own part of the compound and who she considered family, and kept the meetings hidden from Kushina and the rest of the Uzumaki clan. Naruto continued to visit Junko on her own part of the compound and who she considered family and kept the meetings hidden from Kushina and the rest of the Uzumaki clan, who he heard nothing but terrible things about the Yato clan. Naruto liked to stay at the Yato part of the compound considering they said no harsh words to him. They were neutral towards him and Naruto liked that, and he liked to cook for them. He learned several things from the cooks who ruled the kitchen which improved his cooking much more than before. Whenever he got something right and the chefs would compliment him, he would smile and it would affect the people in the room. They just couldn't help it and they didn't want to admit it, but blonde Uzumaki wormed his way into their cold, black hearts. Even Junko, who is well known to just tolerate others and the sense of love had no meaning to her, she grew a soft spot for the blonde boy. How he would cook her meals and make her and the rest of the family feel comfortable in their own home won their appreciation. What shocked Junko and made her feel something other than pure enjoyment of people's suffering or sadistic pleasure was when Naruto gave her a gift. It was a painting of her, and not a cheap, childlike one but one of art. It was of her with her strawberry blonde locks not in her normal twin tails, and she was sitting in a tree, looking out at the scenery in the backyard. She looked at the painting for a long time and she felt something in her chest, and she didn't truly know how to describe the feeling, but she felt sated, almost to the level of crushing enemies underneath her feet, and it made her despise Kushina even more for the way she treated her son. Tsunade just watched how Naruto's personality worked magic against even the coldest of hearts, and how he made the Yato, well known as the opposite of the Uzumaki, to be cold and merciless, creating comfort for one they should have considered a target. She could only think, "Naruto Uzumaki, you are truly an amazing person." Then Tsunade was thrust into another memory. That day, Tsunade soon found herself in Naruto's bare bedroom, the white walls with a tiled floor with a medium-sized bed with covers and a bedside table. He was resting peacefully and she walked towards the sleeping boy and tried to touch him, but her hand passed through his head and she remembered that she just an observer. And then Naruto's bedroom door was kicked open, startling the young boy and Tsunade, who looked at the livid face of Kushina, and it wasn't her hair splitting into 9 parts, but it was straight as an arrow and her face was shadowed with malice and hate. Mom, he stuttered, but Kushina replied with a harsh backslap, causing Tsunade to yell out a curse, but she couldn't do anything but watch. Tsunade could only watch in shock and horror as Kushina screamed and berated her son, yelling at him that she told him to stay away from Junko and he ignored her order and now he had to pay, and she told him of how he disgusted her ever since she first laid eyes on him and how he was a demon. Naruto was shocked out of his mind as pulsing pain of his cheek and the words of his mother hit him in a comparison a bunch of kunai to an enemy ninja. Kushina then started to beat him to a bloody pulp and Naruto's world was racked with pain and he could only lay there and take it. Even now, you demon bastard, you scorn me by not dying. Fine, this will break you and I will make sure you will not live after today. She smiled, twisting her features into something of a monster, causing Tsunade to feel sick. She picked up Naruto by his hair and dragged him out of his room as Tsunade followed, watching as Kushina would scream at him to be silent while Naruto asked what did he do wrong, and when said that Junko was a good person he was rewarded with a harsh head slam into the wall that made him see stars and a cut from his head made blood fall down his face. Kushina finally arrived at her destination. She opened the door and threw Naruto inside and locked it behind her. Naruto slowly picked himself up and he heard Kushina say, "Alright, he's all yours. Make him pay." Mom. Naruto crawled to the door, but then he was suddenly hit in the face and he saw his clan members, all of them leering at him, and Naruto had his back pressed against the door, trembling like a leaf. "Ah, is the demon boy scared?" one asked with a malevolent sneer. "He's probably doing it in excitement just like them, little whore. What are you going to do to me?" Naruto stuttered, wanting nothing more than to be back at his shitty apartment. Grins and sneers from all the people in the room answered him before he was jumped, his clothes were torn off and he was raped repeated for hours, and Tsunade could only watch in horror as he was raped by men and women in his clan as they thought they could get a new bloodline from the demon, and they made sure he felt nothing but pain from the ordeal. Minutes turned into hours and hours turned into days. Tsunade wanted to puke, wanted to scream, wanted to anything to make the horrible images and noises that kept attacking her senses, and she wanted nothing more than to put Kushina's head on a platter, and she watched as the last ones finally finished violating her godson as they dropped him like a used tissue. Kushina came back into the room and saw Naruto covered head to toe in cum, his blood mixing with the cum creating a sickening pink mixture as Naruto gurgled in pain as Kushina lifted him by his hair as his dead-looking eyes looked back into Kushina's smug ones. She said, "Apparently you still won't die, demon. Just because you look like my son and wear his skin doesn't mean I won't punish you, and I know my son and husband are cheering me on from the other side. However, I will not allow your presence taint my house any longer. Do you want us to get rid of him, Kushina-sama?" One of Uzumaki members said. "No, you all done enough. We will celebrate tonight." She smiled at them and the members cheered. Naruto gurgled once more before coughing and throwing up a liter of cum on the floor, making Kushina kick his jaw, shattering it with a harsh crack, and Naruto could only sound out a low moan as Tsunade had tears run down her face. Kushina dragged him out of the house and the scene was caught by one of the Yato members who rushed back to the Yato compound and went to tell Junko. Tsunade felt so hopeless as she watched Kushina manhandle Naruto, dragging him through the brush, and she finally dumped him a dumpster filled to the brim with maggots and rotting garbage. "A fitting end for you, demon," Kushina sneered as she threw him into the filthy muck. Naruto stared at her with dead eyes and Kushina crushed the last bit of light in his eyes and said, "If you come near my compound, I will make the torture you just suffered through look like a playing ninja's game before I finally end your pathetic life, understand?" He slowly nodded as all the light in his eyes finally died as he stared unblinkingly at the woman who crushed him so thoroughly. "Good. Now stay there and rot in hell, you pathetic little demon," she spat before flashing away, leaving Naruto to die in the shadows. Tsunade was now weeping silently as she looked at Naruto's dead eyes staring at her, and she just wanted nothing more than to hold him, but her trembling hands just passed through Naruto's prone figure. Naruto barely moved as he kept staring at that spot Kushina left before Junko found him with her emotionless face. He stared back at her with his dead eyes, and she slowly moved towards him and carried him in her arms. She took him away from the dumpster, and Tsunade knew that Junko was a hair's inch away from committing a slaughter. The Yato clan finally separated from the Uzumaki, moving somewhere the Uzumaki couldn't find them, and she took him back to his new compound, and they were in shock at seeing the state of Naruto. They steeled their faces and took him into their care, healed, and cleaned him up. Naruto hadn't said anything since his farewell present from the Uzumaki clan, and he rested in his bed as Tsunade watched Naruto from his bedside, watching as the Yato cared for him and healed him. The young boy still had a blank look on his face. His blue eyes were dark as sapphires but dull as a polished stone. He remained expressionless as his mind was steel box, and she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Junko walked into Naruto's bedroom. She took a seat on his bed and watched Naruto, and he watched her. Finally, she broke the silence and said, "Do you want to get stronger?" Naruto finally spoke for the first time since his attack in rape and said, "Where do I start?" After saying that, the last thing Tsunade saw was Junko's smiling face and sparkling eyes. Genjutsu release. Tsunade was then back in her own body, and she was staring at Naruto's blue eyes and saw terrifying darkness, strength, and crippling sadness that could make a depressed person seem like his cheery mask of a dead last. He moved away from her as Tsunade ran to a bush and threw up and emptied the contents of her stomach, and when she finished she let out an anguished scream of pain and horror as she felt her own heart ripped out of her chest from the horrors she just witnessed. She punched the ground, causing a massive fissure in the ground as tears ran down her face as she gasped and hiccuped in sadness, pain, and rage. Tsunade felt a hand on her shoulder and looked to see a plain-faced Naruto as he handed her a napkin, which she took and thanked him for. He then led her back to his hotel room and found that the pervert was still out and about with his peeping. She laid on the bed and he sat down on the chair in the room and said, "Do not tell anyone unless I tell you to, okay?" Tsunade nodded and said, I won't tell anyone, I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you." Naruto just nodded his head and told her to go to sleep, which she did as the emotional whirlwind she just went through exhausted her and she just went to sleep. Now that she knows what they did to me, I wonder what she will do next. Naruto thought as he got up and watched Tsunade sleep. However, she grabbed him and pulled him into the bed, not wanting to let him go. "Oh right, I nearly forgot the Senju are a part of the Uzumaki and she has her sensing ability and her emotions are still running rampant," he inwardly sighed. "Oh well, at least it will give the pervert something to cry about, considering his godson is one of few to cuddle with his godmother's massive tits while he can only look and not touch." Naruto inwardly snorted as he made himself comfortable in Tsunade's grasp. He wouldn't admit it, but her protective grasp was welcoming and comfortable as he let her warmth lull him to sleep, and he went through a flashback of his own. Of the time he met Rika. Flashback Naruto. Age 9, Rika. 9, both nearly age 10. Naruto had the symbol of the Yato on his black shirt and he wore green shorts with ninja sandals. He grew, training with the Yato who healed and protected him as he hid in plain sight as they helped him create his mask as a cheery slacker who kept trying and shouting that he would be the greatest Hokage. He was walking downtown in the middle of night, the eerie darkness never failing to comfort him until his ears caught onto an argument he watched as a girl with wild black hair ran out of a building wearing nothing but a hastily put on shirt and underwear and what looked to be her father chasing after her, his shirt open showing his pot belly and an ugly sneer adorning his face. Naruto growled and stalked after the man from the shadows and watched as he cornered the black-haired girl in the alley. He watched as the man confronted the black-haired girl and he was going to grab her until the girl lashed out with a piece of pipe causing the man to fall to the ground. She looked at him with such utter loathing and hate it caused the pathetic man to piss himself in fear. Now, you tremble, you bastard. Since you seem so keen on keeping me as your toy, since your prune of a wife won't give you any. I think I should remind you and why you shouldn't, don't you think, Daddy? He tried to talk, but Rika responded with another bash on the head, beating him with it until his face was a mangled mess, and then sodomized him with the rusty and bloody piece of pipe, causing the man to gurgle out a low groan of pain. Not so fun now, when you are on the receiving end of it, aren't you, bitch, she spat. However, before she could leave, Naruto decided to make his appearance and he jumped down on the fat bastard's head, causing his brains to spray all over Rika and himself. She stared at him in shock as he tilted his head and said, "Did anyone ever tell you, you look cute covered blood?" Which shocked her out of her thoughts and said, "Well, you are the first to do so. So good for you." He smiled at her and began to walk towards her, and she was frozen in place until he was nearly face to face with her, and she stared into his unblinking dark blue eyes, and he just smiled and kissed her cheek, making her violently flinch. What was that for?" she said, grabbing her cheek. "Just 'cause I wanted to. I'll be seeing you around." Naruto then just disappeared, leaving Rika alone. However, he was still watching her as she made her way back to her apartment and saw a bloody mess, and she ran inside. It was her mother on the kitchen floor, looking like a piece of mauled meat, and a pill bottle and note was resting neatly on the table. "She's all yours to deal with. Kill her or let her die, your choice. The pills are something to make sure you don't have the bastard's child." Naruto, huh, Rika whispered, but the woman on the floor heard her and whimpered, causing Rika to look at her. The mother begged her to help her, but Rika turned to the table and popped 2 pills inside and downed it with a glass of water, and when she finished, she smashed the glass cup against the counter and grabbed the largest glass shard like a dagger and turned her attention to her bleeding mother. "Rika-chan, please, no, I'm your mother," the woman rasped. "You aren't my mother. A mother is supposed to protect their daughters, and you allowed your husband to use me as a toy, and guess what, he's dead and will join him in hell." Rika snapped before stabbing her mother repeatedly before slitting her throat, spraying her with blood as she watched the light out of her mother's eyes die out. Rika breathed in and out, and she walked to the bathroom and cleaned herself up and made her way towards her bedroom and fell asleep. "Good girl. This will be the start of a wonderful relationship," Naruto whispered before disappearing with the wind. Naruto silently awakes from his slumber and finds himself within Tsunade's comforting grasp, her pressed against his cheek. He silently sighed as he listened to her heart beating from within her chest and started to slowly untangle himself from her arms. She slightly frowned in her sleep as tried to search for Naruto's source of warmth, and knowing she would wake up before he could what he wanted, he brought himself closer to her, to which she wrapped her arms around him with a sigh. He planted a kiss on the purple diamond in the center of her forehead. The results were interesting to say the least. Tsunade's genjutsu was broken, briefly showing her old age, until the chakra Naruto implanted into her seal started to change her body, rejuvenating it, making it younger and stronger than before. She looked the same as she did in her prime, just a lot stronger with more benefits. Her hair grew longer to where it reached her lower back, slightly curly with dark strawberry highlights. Her fair skin became flawless. Her shirt couldn't really fit her new bust size, and they popped out of it with a tear. My, I can see why the pervert is smitten with her, you ally, but that is no excuse to try to peek on her in the hot springs. That's just rude and pathetic. 2 things real kunoichis would not tolerate, Naruto inwardly tutted, before laying down, closing his eyes and waited for the pervert to arrive. Soon after, he settled into his position of being Tsunade's blanket. The door opened and Jiraiya entered, looking over his notes, and when he looked towards the bed, expecting to find Naruto resting alone, he found Tsunade. She was lightly breathing with different hair and her S out of her shirt, holding onto a sleeping Naruto as if he was a cuddle toy. "What the hell?" Jiraiya snapped, waking up Tsunade quickly, her S proudly on display, much to Jiraiya's pleasure as his nose was now gushing fountains of blood. A groan made the two sages turn to find Naruto rising up from where he fell on the floor, rubbing his head and said, "Damn it, pervert. Do you always scream first thing in the morning?" Tsunade then realizes why she feels suddenly cold and mechanically turns to face the pervert and punches Jiraiya out of the hotel they were staying in with him saying, "That punch was worth it." Not realizing he dropped the notebook when he took off via Tsunade punching airlines. One punch lands you anywhere in the elemental countries, depending on how far you piss her off. Regardless, Tsunade threw off the blanket she was resting with and stretched, as Naruto came up to her and fixed her shirt to a better position, to where she would still have some modesty. "Thank you, Naruto," she said, giving him a hug, which he slowly returned. "You are welcome, Tsunade," he answered back, before being released from her hug. "I feel different, I don't know why, but I do," she slightly yawned, shrugging off the remains of her sleep. "Ah, that. Come with me," he said, grabbing her hand and leading her to the bathroom. Tsunade first saw her hair was different with strawberry highlights. As she ran her fingers through her hair, she found that it was thicker than it was yesterday. She also realized she wasn't wearing her genjutsu, shocking her. "You are wondering why, aren't you?" he asked, simply, as he was sitting on the bathroom counter. She looked at him and waited for his explanation, and he replied, "I put a bit of my chakra into your seal on your forehead, causing it to break your genjutsu and give you your new appearance. Without the use of genjutsu, this is how you really look," shocking her completely. How? Tsunade stuttered, unable to comprehend how he was able to do that. He pulled her closer and kissed her forehead, right where her seal was, making her blush before pulling back. "Understand now?" he questioned softly. "Yeah, thank you," she replied. "Well, who's going to use the shower first? Regardless, I don't care, but I'd rather not have to piece the pervert back together if you decide to shatter his every bone for peeking on you in the bath," he replied, getting off the counter. "Actually, I have an idea." Tsunade grinned. Naruto raises an eyebrow, but when Tsunade takes off her shirt and drops it on the floor, it gave Naruto an inkling of what she wanted to do with him. Several minutes later, Jiraiya comes back into the room, returning from Tsunade punching airlines, and finds that the water to the bathroom is running and Naruto is nowhere in sight. He decided to a chance and peeked into the bathroom to find a sight he both loved and hated. It was Naruto in Tsunade's lap in the bathtub, being washed by her, fully and covered in suds. Jiraiya could barely believe it, but he felt anger and jealousy well up in the pit of his stomach as he watched the two. Naruto smirked at him from his position before slamming the door shut. He chuckled in remembrance of the miserable look on Jiraiya's face and said, "I see why you wanted me to enter the bath with you. That's hilarious." He smirked at the woman running her hands through his hair. "I told you," she smiled, pressing her S into his back. The two bask in the warmth of each other and the soapy water until Tsunade asks a question that is on her mind, "Naruto. Do I still have to become Hokage?" "No, you don't. I won't force you. However, I'd rather not have Danzo of all people lead the village because he wants me as a weapon, and the old man gave me permission to leave if Danzo ever became Hokage." "Would you truly leave Konoha?" Tsunade questioned. "Yes, I would. The village hasn't really done anything for me, and I have 2 girls and several others that would come with me. Then, can you make space for me to join you?" Tsunade said, making him freeze. "What?" he questioned, looking up at her. "If you have to leave, I'm coming with you. I'll be damned if I have to go back there with no family. The village will stand, but family comes and goes, and I want to be with my family. If you will let me," she finished softly. Naruto turned to her, looking into brown eyes and said, "The more, the merrier," he smiled. He was rewarded with a sweet smile and a hug before the two decided to get out of the tub after washing all the soap and suds off their bodies. The two then left the bathroom and got changed into different clothes for the day, and they left the sobbing man on the floor, weeping for his precious notebook and the material he could make with it, and the pair went downstairs for some breakfast. Naruto. Am I the only one who knows about that? The two girls know, Junko, and the Yato clan along with the Uzumaki. Not even the old man knows, and I would like to keep it that way. Hell knows what that old man would do if he knew. Naruto trailed off in a whisper, before having Tsunade lead the way for breakfast. What Naruto didn't know was that the source of his suffering would be spilling her guts to the one man he didn't want his story of his abuse to be told to, and so would change the course of ninja history. Konoha, Hokage Tower. Hiruzen is doing paperwork and a knock is heard on his door and said, "Come in." He said, not even looking up, and when the door opened his semi-smiling face became shocked before turning into a grim line. "Hey, old monkey," she said, looking sheepishly at Hiruzen. "Kushina," he whispered, putting his pen down on his desk. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" she asked, quietly. "Cut the bullshit and get in here," he said, seriously, wondering where the hell was she when she could take care of Naruto when he was smaller. "Everyone please, leave the room," he said, softly, and 5 slight snaps went off in Hiruzen waiting, before sighing and flung 2 kunai, one behind him and one above him, showing 2 dead bodies of Danzo's ABNU. He sent them to the T&I unit and focused all his attention of Kushina. "Where the hell were you?" he snapped at the woman he thought of a surrogate daughter. She looked down and he felt something bad well up in the pit of his stomach. "If you won't tell me, then I will call Inoichi," he told her. She was still silent, which caused him to sigh, and he called for Inoichi to come to his office immediately. The blonde interrogator arrived into the Hokage's office and was shocked senseless at seeing one of his best friends among the living. "Kushina senpai." Kushina winced at hearing the voice of the young man she took under her wing. She knew that he would never see her the same again after this. "She will not tell me why she has returned, Inoichi. Please enter her mind and tell me what you see." "Yes, Hokage-sama," Inoichi saluted, before saying, "Psycho mind transmission." He placed a hand on her forehead and read her mind and everything that available for his use. He ended the technique and shakily removed his hand from her forehead and looked down, not wanting to see the woman he used to have so much respect for, not right now. "Inoichi-kun, I slap. Asterisk. Inoichi." Hiruzen yelled, but Inoichi ignored him and yelled at Kushina, "How could you? To your own son, Inoichi Yamanaka." Hiruzen shouted, close to snapping at the two of them. "Sir." Inoichi then explained in detail, slightly stumbling over the more gruesome parts, and then when he finished, he looked he wanted to get wasted to get the memories of Naruto's screaming voice out of his head. "I owe that kid one hell of an apology when he shows up." Inoichi thought as he needed to tell Shikaku and Choza. "Along with telling my daughter to give the kid some space whenever he returns." "You are dismissed, Inoichi," Hiruzen said, softly. He nodded, but not without glaring at the major up of a woman he considered a sister. When the door closed, Hiruzen slowly turned to face the red-headed woman. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you. Right now," Hiruzen growled, looking like he was inches away from choking her to death. "Please." "I wasn't in the right state of mind," she said, as tears welled up in her eyes. "Wrong answer," he yelled, summoning Emma in his staff form and smashing her through his window, whipping off his Hokage robes, in his battle gear, and went to deliver more pain to Kushina. He screamed at her, "How dare you show your face here!" He smashed his bow staff into her stomach, slamming her into a building. "You could have loved him," he yelled, missing her head by scant inches. "Please understand," she said, trying to avoid his fury-filled strikes. "No. Do you know how much he wanted someone to love him? Do you know how it felt to see a boy you considered a grandson nearly burnt alive?" he yelled, shocking Kiba, Choji, and Shikamaru, who was among the crowd watching Hiruzen attack Kushina. "Do you know what's like to see a young boy who just wanted to be happy, have his childhood cruelly torn away from him by civilians who didn't understand a kunai sealed into a scroll? Do you know how many times I had to stop his assassinations or his suicide attempts, and that was when he was only 4? once more shocking the three rookies as he caught her in the stomach, making her hack up a glob of blood. You disgust me. If I had to make a full pardon between you or Itachi Uchiha, I choose the Uchiha, he said, slamming her down to earth with each enunciation of his sentence, her broken body forming a crater in the middle of the village. Hiruzen then jumped to the Hokage tower and stood on the roof of it and shouted, "All of you should be ashamed. Both civilians and ninja for targeting a young boy to use as your stress reliever. But here's the thing, and I hope you all go to hell when you die for trying to kill an innocent boy. He is the son of Minato Namikaze. That's right, the boy you spat on, crippled, tortured, and tried to kill is the son of your fourth Hokage." The silence was deafening before screams of panic and denial came out and people were begging that it was not true, but it was. People were running around like a bunch of headless chickens and Hiruzen didn't have it in him to give a damn. He plopped down into his chair and let out a sigh of relief, and it was answered by an empty chuckle coming from the shadows of his office, and he turned around to see Junko Uzumaki, or now Junko Yato, the head of the Yato clan. Hiruzen thought he would feel the same type of foreboding he would always get whenever she was near him, but he felt nothing and just didn't have any will to care. Well, nicely done, old monkey, she said, sitting herself down on his desk. Only you would say such a thing, Junko, Hiruzen said to the smirking woman. Kushina was taken to the hospital, and only because of her Uzumaki healing powers that she survived Hiruzen's brutal onslaught. By now, the news would be traveling all over the village, and Ino, getting the information from around the village and had a talk with her dad, who gave her the extreme bare thread and sugar-coated version of Naruto's torment and how it was true, made Ino rush to the toilet to puke. After hogging the toilet for 30 minutes, she thought, "I'm so sorry, Naruto. I will make it up to you, I promise." Unknown to her, several others were on the same wavelength as Ino and needed to talk to Naruto when he got back. Rika was eating at the ramen stand, paying a visit whenever Naruto was unable to, and one of the customers was talking about Naruto's abuse and how he would apologize whenever he got the chance to see him. Rika could only silently snort, knowing that Naruto would rather eat his own liver than to forgive these pieces of crap who only now that they know he is the son of the fourth do they kiss his. Be safe, Naru. I have a feeling you are not going to like what the civilians are planning for you for when you come back, Rika thought to herself before counting down the days Naruto would come back. Hinata, on the other hand, was eating lunch in her clan's dining room, her thoughts switching from her training schedule, sparring with Rika, and the stormy thoughts of what was going to happen between Naruto and the villagers. She was fully certain she would choose Naruto over her family, considering what he did for her. Kushina, Hinata thought with a growl. The evil woman could not even begin to be called a mother, who would use their own flesh and blood like that, well, except the Hyugas, but still. I hope Naruto rips off your head and I get to see it, Hinata finished off, darkly. She sighed as she finished off her meal and went to her bedroom to look outside and whispered, "Please be safe, Naruto-kun." She would tell Naruto when he comes back from his mission with the Toad Sage. 3 days later, Rain Village. Akatsuki hideout. Everyone is here. Yes, Pain, Conan said. Yes, leader, the rest of the group said. What is the status of the Kyuubi container? Pain ordered. Yes, apparently Kushina Uzumaki is alive, Sasori said, shocking the group. The red-headed demon is alive, Kisame said, tightening his grip on his sword, itching for a fight. Itachi kept his icy, emotionless face on, keeping his surprise hidden, even though Toby could see it as clear as day. What does that have to do with the Kyuubi container? Conan said. Naruto Uzumaki is the son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, Sasori said, closing his eyes waiting for certain members to start cursing. He wasn't disappointed. Several members screamed outrage, shock, and curses, mostly from Hidan before Pain silenced them. Explain, Sasori. Sasori then explained with the information that he obtained from his sources from Konoha, from Kushina arrival, her beatdown from Hiruzen, and his announcement of Naruto Uzumaki as Minato Namikaze's son, which left the group in shock. Dismissed, Pain said, and for once everyone didn't argue, and one by one they cut the connection. Itachi made his way from Kisame to think as he flashed back to first meeting Naruto in a long time. Those eyes, cold, dead, and focused, along with his power. No child can go from a bright orange screaming to the heavens Moran to a cold and dead-eyed shinobi without some type of tragic incident, and a mother abandoning him would make him cold, but not dead-eyed. So, what happened between Naruto Uzumaki and Kushina Uzumaki to make him too ruthless? Itachi softly said to himself as he looked up at the sky above him. How long has he been this way, and how could nobody have seen it? Itachi wondered. Tsunade then goes on a drink with Jiraiya, which leads to her knocking him out with drugs, so he would get out of the way so she could meet up with Orochimaru. Tansaku quarters. Tsunade meets up with Orochimaru, who says, "So you decided to side with me? I bet your new changes." "I won't side with you. I just want you out of my life," she said, ignoring his questioning tone for the second part of his sentence, her hands glowing a greenish-blue hue as she made her way towards the smirking snake Sannin. However, Kabuto slashed at her with a kunai and taking a defensive stance before Orochimaru. "So, Tsunade, you decided to betray me?" Orochimaru asked. "There is nothing to betray if I didn't side with you first," Tsunade replied. Orochimaru chuckled and said, "We will bring you by force, then." Kabuto then goes to attack Tsunade, and in which Tsunade defends herself and attacks him in turn. The battle goes in Tsunade's favor when she manages to land a hit on him with her body pathway derangement technique. However, she watches in slight fascination and horror as he fixes himself with his knowledge of the human body. He cuts his hand and flicks his blood onto her face, making her go into shock, and he damaged her hamstring in her left leg. When the loyal ninja of Orochimaru charged at Tsunade to knock her unconscious, he is blindsided from the left that made his head spin. He turned around to see the emotionless face of Naruto Uzumaki staring down at him. "Naruto Uzumaki," Kabuto said, in shock. Naruto didn't reply and kicked Kabuto further away from Tsunade's prone form that was still in shock from blood being splashed on her as he wrapped his hands around her and whispered to her, "You are not there, Tsunade. Come to reality. Come back to me." Tsunade snapped out of her shock to find Naruto holding her as he looked at Kabuto and Orochimaru observing the pair. "I'm fine, thanks. Deal with the snake Tsunade." "I'll deal with his bitch boy," Naruto said, coldly. Tsunade wipes off Kabuto's blood off her face and glares at Orochimaru's smug face as she healed the damaged hamstring in her left leg. Naruto vs. Kabuto. Kabuto stands up looking at the silent, emotionless form of Naruto Uzumaki, everything from the perky, orange, sunshine blonde dead last that screamed that he wanted to be Hokage, and how the person in front was that dead last's extreme opposite. "Come on, Kabuto, do not tell me that one kick is all it takes to shock you into a stupor," Naruto said. "You little shit." Kabuto sneered before going to attack Naruto, who met him head-on, attacking the cool-faced genin with a pair of chakra-enhanced kunais. Tsunade then attacks Orochimaru, who with his flexibility and fighting prowess allowed him to avoid her mountain-crushing strikes, and then Jiraiya entered the fray with Shizune at his side, who healed him, getting into the fight between Tsunade and Orochimaru and Shizune backing up Naruto. Finally, three Sannin used the summoning jutsu, enveloping the area in smoke before dissipating, and three large summons stood across each other. Manda, the snake boss. Gamabunta, the toad boss. Katsuyu, the slug boss. My, how interesting, Naruto thought, looking at the stare-down between the three sages. Naruto. Kyuubi said. Yes, I know, Naruto thought to his companion before biting into his hand and slamming down on the ground and making his own summon, enveloping himself in smoke, and what stood before the three boss summons was something that made them feel fear run down their spines. Kyuubi. Gamabunta said. Hey, you tadpole, I see you still have the scar from so long ago. Kyuubi said with a smirk. Naruto. Tsunade said. looking at the boy who was standing on the head of the demon that nearly destroyed Konoha. Orochimaru, you didn't tell me you were facing the Kyuubi. You will serve me many sacrifices for this. Manda snapped. Of course, Manda, Orochimaru said in a silky tone. This isn't good. If Manda finds out that Orochimaru cannot use his hands, he will easily turn on us, Kabuto thought with slight worry over this upcoming battle. Naruto, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru were having the stare-down of the century. Naruto was standing on the Kyuubi's head, the nine-tailed fox was smirking at the snake and toad summons as her tails waved excited behind her. Tsunade was standing on her own personal summon, Katsuyu still a bit in awe at her godson summoning the damn Kyuubi. Damn, talk about having a literal ace up your sleeve. Tsunade thought as she glanced at her godson once more, before turning her attention to Orochimaru. Jiraiya had to rely on all his ninja experience to not have his mouth drop to the ground as he stared at Naruto standing on top of the nine-tailed fox that nearly destroyed Konoha. Naruto, how can you summon the Kyuubi of all things? Jiraiya asked himself as Gamabunta wasn't that far away from his train of thought. Orochimaru glared at the boy who has been shown to be more than a pain in his side since the Chunin exams, and he needed to be either eliminated or on his side as both his summon and Kabuto glared at the cold-eyed genin. Well, what you know, my new snakeskin wallet has arrived, Gamabunta snarked, blowing a puff of smoke into Manda's face. How dare you disrespect me, you dirty, rotten toad. Manda hissed in displeasure. The Sannin end today, Orochimaru, you will die today, Tsunade yelled, towards the Sannin. Let's get this started, Tsunade, Jiraiya yelled, his hands flipping through hand signs. Orochimaru said nothing, but a smirk on his face as he looked at his ex-comrades. Naruto mentally told his companion, let's get this party started, Q. Kyuubi let out an even larger smirk that caused all three boss summons to be put on edge as the Kyuubi smacked her tails down on the ground, causing a thunderous earthquake, forcing the battle to begin. Manda struck first, avoiding Gamabunta's strike with his dagger as he wrapped his body around Katsuyu, tightening around her in an unrelenting choke hold, causing Tsunade to yell out, Katsuyu. However, the massive slug then split into many smaller slugs, escaping from Manda's hold to reform entirely, causing both the Kyuubi and Naruto to raise an eyebrow in interest. Kyuubi then entered the battle, smacking Manda away from Katsuyu with one of her tails, but that caused Gamabunta's sword to be tossed away, just slightly out of his reach. Manda hissed and bared his fangs at the large fox and charged at the nine-tailed fox, but the Kyuubi wrapped two tails around Manda, halting its charge. Tsunade, seeing an opportunity, grabbed Gamabunta's knife and stabbed it into Manda's head, who responded with a loud roar of his displeasure and pain. Orochimaru vs. Jiraiya. Jiraiya and Orochimaru attacked each other, the snake Sannin with his unique sword while Jiraiya attacked with kunai. Orochimaru tried to bite Jiraiya using his long neck technique to reach him, but Jiraiya used his wild lion's mane technique to protect himself, making Orochimaru unable to bite him as he righted his neck to its usual position. Still the annoying Dobi who can't do anything, aren't you, Jiraiya? Orochimaru said. Maybe, but this Dobi will finally end you for all the suffering you caused, Jiraiya said. HMPH, Orochimaru snarked, before slowly tearing off his face and a beautiful female's face appeared. Huh, Jiraiya said, starting at the beautiful woman's face, before freaking out. No, I am not gay. How can you have such a beautiful face? No, that sounds horrible. I might cry, Jiraiya yelled, before hacking, thinking he was going to puke. Orochimaru could only have a large sweat drop appear behind his head, before punching Jiraiya in the face, making him stop his blubbering. Idiot, I completed my jutsu, I have obtained immortal life. Orochimaru said, before being punched by Jiraiya, who growled at him as Orochimaru returned to his male face. Damn, now you are even creepier than before, and you are a pedophile that goes after little boys, Jiraiya said, turning green. I am not a pedophile. Orochimaru snapped. Sure, you aren't. Don't worry, There are many psychiatrists that can help you with your issues, Jiraiya smiled. Orochimaru then nearly stabbed him with his sword of Kusanagi, but Jiraiya avoided the strike and tried to land a snap kick towards Orochimaru, which he avoided, and the fight continued. Kabuto vs. Shizune. Kabuto and Shizune fight against each other, Kabuto with his curved kunai and Shizune with her senbons. Shizune had several senbons were drenched with different types of potions and concoctions that ranged from immediate incapacitation to instant death. Not bad, Kabuto said, before charging at Shizune. Shizune flipped through several hand signs and called out one of her secret attacks, Super Ham Attack. The stupidity of the name caused Kabuto to stop in shock, which gave Shizune enough time to use Tauntaun as a projectile which hit the ninja of Orochimaru in the face, causing him to be thrown back a few feet. What the hell? He yelled as he clutched his face in shock of having a small pig tossed at his face. Kabuto then went to attack once again and she called out, Super Ham Meat Barrage. Poor Kabuto was smacked with multiple clones of Tauntaun, squealing in anger at all sides, burying him in a mountain of pigs for a short couple of seconds, before disappearing in a poof of smoke. Kabuto then kept his distance, not wanting to be hit with any other version of that stupid pig-based attack. Manda roared, damn it, I won't be able to eat solid food for 3 months because of this. Orochimaru, don't you dare summon me or else I will have you killed. With the massive snake saying his piece, he then left the battle, poofing back into his cave to heal. Orochimaru glared, knowing that Manda was going to be a pain for the next several months because of his injury, and he kicked Jiraiya away from him as he had to defend himself against Tsunade's brutal punches, taking several to the face as she punching him towards Gamabunta's large dagger. The snake Sannin righted himself at the last second, but Tsunade appeared behind him and kicked him into the ground and then used one of her signature attacks, Heaven's Kick of Pain. The kick landed directly on his stomach, causing him to puke up blood and bile as he felt his stomach was destroyed as the power of her kick caused a crater to form underneath him. He used the rubble and dust that her technique caused to shed his skin, avoiding Katsuyu's sticky tongue tooth acid that ate away at the ground he had just been standing on, and he avoided being roasted from Jiraiya's toad oil bomb. But he was unable to avoid being caught by the Kyuubi's tail, ripping his body in half. Orochimaru used his snakes to fix his body, making it whole once more, much to the disgust of both Tsunade and Jiraiya. Kabuto then appeared next to the snake Sannin, avoiding another round of Shizune's needles. The snake Sannin glared at all his attackers as they stood before him, glaring at him in return. Orochimaru then started to disappear into the ground. He smirked at them, saying, "Shame on you, Tsunade, giving up the chance to meet your loved ones." Tsunade snarled, "They would be ashamed of me if I believed that you could bring them back to life for me. They would be nothing more than cheap knockoffs. Regardless, I have many ways. I will get my arms back and then I will destroy Konoha and you. Naruto Uzumaki will be the first of many to be killed. Get in line, Pitamaru. There are many who already want me dead and they have tried and failed. Your threats make no difference," Naruto said. Orochimaru finally disappeared with Kabuto in tow, his eyes completely on Naruto before being swallowed into the ground below him. The two Sannin and Naruto stood silently waiting until they were sure Orochimaru was no longer among them, and they slightly relaxed their stance. Tsunade and Jiraiya called off their summons. Katsuyu replied, "Milady, until we meet again," before disappearing back into her realm. Gamabunta, grabbing his dagger and said, "Brat, next time we meet each other we'll have a drink, you hear?" "Sure." Naruto shrugged, to which the massive toad nodded and then disappeared. The Kyuubi then returned back into her seal on Naruto's stomach to rest, and Naruto landed safely on the ground. Jiraiya looked like he wanted to have a long talk with him about his skills and how he was able to summon the Kyuubi, but Naruto ignored the toad Sannin's inquisitive look and said, "I need to borrow Tsunade." "What for?" Jiraiya and Shizune asked. "My own reasons," Naruto said, before disappearing with Tsunade in tow, leaving Shizune and Jiraiya alone. "Damn it, Naruto, get back here." Jiraiya yelled before taking off in a burst of speed with Shizune right behind him carrying Tauntaun. The two searched the town, minus Jiraiya being delayed for peeking on women and Shizune having to heal him from getting the shit kicked out of him from pissed off females. The pair then searched for the missing two at the last gambling den Jiraiya and Shizune hadn't checked. The missing two could be seen sitting together among a crowd of women surrounding Naruto as he won machine after machine after machine, cleaning out the gambling den and left Tsunade with enough money to pay off all her gambling debts with money to spare, making her extremely happy. Shizune had her mouth on the ground in shock and then fell into a dead faint as Jiraiya was staring at Naruto, being surrounded and caressed by many beautiful women, including Tsunade. He felt very emotionally conflicted. He couldn't decide whether to be proud of Minato's son for being such a babe magnet, cry because Naruto had so many beautiful women surrounding him, or perverted as his mind came up 10 story plotlines from the jealousy-inspiring scene alone. The next day, the group then left Tanzaku quarters for Konoha, taking their time as Naruto wanted to spend a bit of time with Hinata and Rika, unaware that things in Konoha were different and he would not like it, not one bit. Konoha Gate. Naruto, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, and Tauntaun appear over the horizon and the Eternal Gate guards, Azumo and Kotetsu are the first to greet them. Hey, Naruto, Azumo said, running up the blonde genin. Azumo, Kotetsu, how are you guys? Naruto said, letting out a slight smile. Fine, but you wouldn't believe what happened while you were away. Azumo said, staring at Naruto. Wah, Naruto, hurry up, we need to meet with the Hokage. Jiraiya said, interrupting their conversation. I'll find out later. Bye guys, Naruto said, leaving the two as the group entered the village. How much do you want to bet he will rip off the head of the next person who irritates him? Don't play that shit with me, man. Not even Tsunade would take that bet, it's too easy. Town scare. Naruto was walking beside Tsunade with Shizune between himself and Jiraiya carrying Tauntaun near her chest as she took in Konoha's sights as Naruto looked straight ahead, ignoring the whispers of people, but was on edge due to the lack of glares or muttered curses of demon brat and how he should have died. Instead, he received looks of awe, respect, disbelief, confusion, or sadness with the occasion hint of pity, making him fight to hide a growl that welled up deep from within his chest. What the hell is going on here? Naruto asked himself as he avoided looking at the villagers. Tsunade then cuts the awkward silence between the group and says, I need to go to the hospital. Naruto, I will have Shizune call you back. We are going to meet Hiruzen, alright? Naruto nodded. Got it. The blonde Biju holder flashed away to his favorite restaurant, Ichiraku Ramen, where Ayame was manning the counter and she welcomed with a rib-crushing hug. After Naruto was able to release himself from Ayame's death grip, he asked for a bowl of ramen and asked, what is going on, Ayame? Why are the civilians acting the way they are? Ayame stopped wiping down the counter and slowly turned towards Naruto with a frown and said, they know. Naruto's chopsticks snapped in two in his grip as he growled, his blue eyes turning red in anger. What? How? Naruto gritted out. Apparently, Kushina came to Konoha of her own violation and she confessed her sins to Hokage-sama, who didn't take the news very well as he beat her up very badly using his bow staff. I see. Where is she? He asked. I don't know, but I don't care. Dad and I told her to never show her face around here again, because of what she did to you. I nearly hit her with my frying pan if it wasn't for my dad. Even then he wanted to throw a bunch of knives at her and nearly took out an eye when he tossed a knife at her to make his point. Good old Tuki. Naruto smiled. Of course, anything for my favorite customer and you are practically a son to me. Anyone who could do that to a child has no business here in my restaurant and I don't care if even God wishes for her to enter. She won't, Tuki said, coming from the back, a serious look on his face. Naruto smiled and ordered 3 bowls of ramen to start off as he asked about what else he had missed, besides Kushina's return to Konoha. Konoha's hospital. Tsunade arrived at the hospital with Shizune in tow as Jiraiya went to take one last peep at the hot springs before going to meet Hiruzen. She goes to the front desk and the nurse stationed there stood up and bowed saying, Tsunade-sama. Several other doctors and nurses who heard the woman shouted, repeated her actions, Tsunade-sama. Said woman ignored the bows and said, what rooms were Sasuke Uchiha and Kakashi Hackett residing in? Oh, yes. Sasuke Uchiha and Kakashi Hackett are stationed in the same room and it is on 357 on the third floor. Tsunade nodded at her and made her way up to the third floor and past several rooms leading up to where her new patients were stationed. She opened the door and walked inside, dismissing the nurse stationed in the room and made her way towards Kakashi first and healed him, causing him to wake up with a start. He looked around the room and saw Tsunade staring down at him. The look on her face was nothing short of blank, making him wonder what he do to upset her or if she was going to punch him out the hospital room. Tsunade then turned away from him and focused on Sasuke, who awoke with a groan of pain as he felt the bright light of the room blind his eyes before his mind recalled what happened to him before he was placed into his coma. Itachi! He yelled. Tsunade rolled her eyes as she recalled what Naruto said about his unfortunate teammate. He really needs to move on with his life. The room door is then opened by Asuma, Kurenai, and Guy with Sakura and Ino gushing that their Sasuke-kun was awake and ran towards him to squeeze them and would have played tug-a-war with Sasuke as the rope if not for Tsunade in the room. Asuma lightly coughed, catching Tsunade's attention. Yes, she said. My old man wants to meet you and to bring Jiraiya-sama and Naruto with you, he replied. Tsunade nodded and turned towards Shizune who shunshined away to get Naruto, already knowing where he would be and then to get Jiraiya who was at the hot springs. Ramen stand. Shizune arrived at the ramen stand and found Naruto finishing his 16th bowl of ramen, much to her dismay and slight awe. I will never understand how you can eat so much and not get fat, Shizune said in exasperation. Secret trick of the Yato clan, Naruto smiled. Of course, are you finished? She asked. Naruto said, for now, Tsuki, I'll be back. Later Ayame. Bye. Naruto. Ayame said, see you later, Naruto. Tsuki called from the back. Naruto placed a wad of bills on the counter and made to walk with Shizune who told him that had to pick up Jiraiya. The young genin groaned and said, he's there, isn't he? Shizune slightly nodded and Naruto sent a clone to do his dirty work for him. Why did you summon a clone? She asked. A large smile from Naruto was her answer and she wasn't sure on whether she wanted him to explain his actions. Hot springs. The Naruto clone arrived silently at the hot springs. In his sights was his target, pervertedly giggling, and he flipped through hand signs and made his signature Why no jutsu coupled with a hedge, turning him into a buxom woman with silver hair, green eyes, and tan skin. As she walked, Jiraiya saw her out of the corner of his eye and instantly transported over to her and tried to woo her, which Naruto pretended to be smitten by, until Jiraiya touched her and she screamed, help. Pervert. Pervert. The wall surrounding the hot spring fell with a crash and there was a group of enraged women who apparently bathed with a variety of weapons, and not even Jiraiya could ignore the banner that the wall slightly hid that said, Anti-Pervert Club. Shit. Jiraiya could say before he was pounded on by the horde of angry, scantily clad female wearing nothing but towels barely covering their extremities, and the poor pervert couldn't even enjoy the view. After the crowd had their fill, they left after pulling up the wall for the hot springs, leaving a pile of bloody human flesh on the street. The clone smiled as he turned back to his original form and Jiraiya stood up and brushed himself off, shrugging off a beating that would have crippled a lesser man, and glared at the clone. Tsunade wants your perverted in the Hokage's office. After saying his message, the clone vanished in a puff of smoke. I really hate that kid, Jiraiya said to himself as he shunshined towards the Hokage's office. Hospital room number 357. Asuma, Kurenai, Guy stood before Kakashi's bed as Sakura and Ino practically snuggled into Sasuke's bed, much to his horror and disgust as he wanted to get out of bed, but couldn't because his body was stiff and he was stuck until someone got the fangirls off of him. Ignoring the Uchiha's plight, Asuma said, you missed a lot, Kakashi. Oh, Kakashi said, pulling out an Ika Ika book from nowhere. Yes, apparently the boy you consider to be nothing, but a waste was the son of the man who was your teacher, Kurenai said. Kakashi's book dropped from his hand and landed on his lap. What? You heard me, Kakashi. Naruto Uzumaki is the son of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Kakashi turned pale as he recalled everything he did to Naruto as an ABNU and as his teacher. Oh God, what have I done? Kakashi said in horror. Mighty Guy could only sadly shake his head at his once youthful rival, knowing that Karma was a bitch and she was back in heat. Sasuke, on the other hand, doesn't give a shit and was growling as Sakura and Ino used him as a cuddle toy. The Dobi doesn't deserve it. I'll have the council force him to teach me everything and allow me access to the Namikaze library or else he will be banished. After all, Namikaze or not, he's still a dead last, Sasuke finished with a smirk. Hokage's office. Jiraiya met with Naruto, Tsunade, and Shizune who were waiting for him and asked Naruto, was that really necessary? Naruto smiled and said, yes, and when you stop being a pervert is when I will stop. Never. Jiraiya yelled, in a stupid pose, pointing his finger up to the sky. Whatever. Naruto said, causing the Sannin to faceplant on the floor. Can we go inside, please? Shizune said before one of three got annoyed and started a fist fight. Tsunade nodded and entered the room with the rest of the group coming up behind her, and when everyone was in the room, she closed the door and Hiruzen, who was sitting on his chair, flipped through hand signs and slammed his palm on his desk, making the room glow. Hello, little Naruto, a familiar voice said, causing Naruto to turn around and let out a smile. Junko, Naruto said, moving toward the strawberry-haired woman. Junko wrapped her arms around him and rubbed her cheek against his with a smile as he basked in her scent before another scent came across him that he instantly recognized, made him growl as his eyes turned red. Kushina came out from the shadows. A couple of bandages were still wrapped around her head from Hiruzen's brutal beatdown, and she had shadows underneath her eyes as she stared at the young man she abused and used because of her delusion that he was the Kyuubi. Son, Kushina said, softly. Naruto growled as he tightened his grip around Junko and gritted out, I'm not your son, Kushina. You made damn sure of that, remember? I'm just a pathetic little demon. Kushina, you're alive, Jiraiya said in shock as he stared at the tired woman who looked like a shadow of her former self. Sue, don't you dare. You don't deserve to call me by that name. Not anymore, not considering what you did to him. Your son. Causing Kushina to pale as she looked at Naruto, the hate was still present, but his eyes were a cold blue once more and his face was blank. Can someone tell me what the hell is going on? Jiraiya said, close to snapping. Well, Kushina, tell him, or should I? Junko said, smirking. This is going to be nothing short of amusing, Junko thought as she savored Kushina's miserable face as she decided whether to stay silent or not. Junko wrapped her arms around him and rubbed her cheek against his with a smile as he basked in her scent before another scene came across him that he instantly recognized, made him growl as his eyes turned red. Kushina came out from the shadows. A couple of bandages were still wrapped around her head from Hiruzen's brutal beatdown, and she had shadows underneath her eyes as she stared at the young man she abused and used because of her delusion that he was the Kyuubi. Son, Kushina said, softly. Naruto growled as he tightened his grip around Junko and gritted out, I'm not your son, Kushina. You made damn sure of that, remembered? I'm just a pathetic little demon. Kushina, you're alive, Jiraiya said in shock as he stared at the tired woman who looked like a shadow of her former self. Sue, don't you dare. You don't deserve to call me by that name. Not anymore, not considering what you did to him. Your son, Tsunade spat as she clenched her fists in anger. Causing Kushina to pale as she looked at Naruto, the hate was still present, but his eyes were a cold blue once more and his face was blank. Can someone tell me what the hell is going on? Jiraiya said, close to snapping. Well, Kushina, tell him, or should I? Junko said, smirking. This is going to be nothing short of amusing, Junko thought as she savored Kushina's miserable face as she decided whether to stay silent or not. Present. Junko massaged Naruto's shoulders as she purred, "Well, Kushina. We're waiting." Kushina remains silent as Naruto snorts in disgust, causing her to wince. She whimpered, "Please, son. Don't you dare. You don't deserve to call me that. You lost the right to call that. I have no mother. She's dead," he hissed as his eyes flashed red. "Damn it, Kushina. You will tell him or I will make what I did to you a few days ago seem like a pat on the head." Hiruzen growled. Kushina sighed as turned towards Jiraiya and started to explain her sins, inwardly wincing every time that Jiraiya's eyes turned a shade darker and how his knuckles clenched so tightly that they were white and nearly bleeding. "So, let me get this straight. You abandoned your son because you thought he was the Kyuubi incarnate. Then after gathering all the lost Uzumakis across the elemental nations along with your sister, you decided to come back to Konoha to hear about either Naruto's death or mistreatment, and being satisfied you were going to until leave Naruto saw you. After which he started to watch you before finally confronting you, and then you, falsely, welcomed him back, getting his hopes up of having a family while telling Naruto not to tell the old man that you were back. Then you forced him to be your literal slave in everything but name, along with being your punching bag for your clan to take their stress out on, and then finally, if that wasn't enough, you, still thinking he was the Kyuubi, decided to have your clan members," Jiraiya shudders as he swallows his disgust for a second, "rape him repeatedly for over the course of 3 days and 3 nights, while he experiences nothing but pain as he is aware and conscious for all of it. Finally, you drag him through the brush and you toss him in a maggot-infested dumpster while threatening if you ever saw him again you would make what you did to him sound like a child's ninja game. Do I have everything in order?" Jiraiya said, his tone dead as his eyes glared into Kushina's. Tsunade refused to look at Kushina as she moved to stand next to Naruto, putting a hand on his shoulder as Shizune stood next to the Hokage, placing on her chest, trying not to throw up what she ate this morning as she couldn't believe what she just heard. She looked down and said, "Yes." Jiraiya didn't need any more confirmation and punched Kushina in the face, where she fell on one knee as blood trailed from her eye as she put a hand over her eye. "You have some nerve. How could you? He was your son. Plus, what made you think he was a demon in the first place?" he yelled. I don't know. I had the same burden as well, and when Minato put the Kyuubi into him I just snapped. I couldn't take it. I couldn't bear the thought of being on the receiving end of glares and curses and of being called a freak again," she said, picking herself off the ground. "And so you just leave your son behind to take your place? You could have protected him." Shizune said, softly, tears falling down her cheeks. "I just couldn't," Kushina said. "Then you shouldn't have kids." Tsunade interrupted as she pressed Naruto against her chest, wanting nothing more than to rip Kushina apart. "Yes, Kushina, you couldn't what? You just couldn't take care of Naruto. What a load of shit. You just didn't want him. The pain of losing your husband was just too much for that simple hothead of yours, along him being sealed with the thing that set you apart from everyone else, and so you decided to leave," Junko said, moving away from Naruto and standing right in front of Kushina. Kushina placed her head down as she felt the glares of Tsunade, Naruto, Jiraiya, Shizune, Hiruzen, and the smug look of Junko boring holes in her head. "I have no excuse," she said, her shoulders slumped. "Tell me, Kushina. I am curious, what made you think of me as a person?" Naruto asked. Kushina started to cry as tears started to drip onto the floor as she calmed herself and said, "Minato wrote me a letter, explaining the details of the seal and how the demon will never take control of Naruto unless Naruto commits suicide or his mind breaks. And now you realize you're up." Naruto chuckled as his tenant's laughter filled his ears. "Yes," she said, looking at Naruto's cold gaze. Naruto could only chuckle until he dissolved into a fit of mad laughter. "That's funny. That's real funny. Now what? You want my love, right? Thinking I would welcome you back with open arms?" Kushina didn't bother reply as she kept her head down. "You really are pathetic," Naruto said, softly as he basked in her misery. "Son, Please, give me another chance, she said, going down on her hands and knees. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Your words have no meaning, just like you obtaining my forgiveness. You have nothing I want and you will get nothing from me. Now, is this shitshow of a meeting done and over with? I have 2 girls I need to meet with. Yes, Naruto, you can go. I have several other things to discuss with Kushina and I'm pretty sure Tsunade wants her questions answered as well, Hiruzen said as Tsunade cracked her knuckles. Very well. Then good day, old man, Su-chan, Shizune-chan, and pervert, Naruto said as he was about to walk out before he was grabbed from behind and pressed against the chest of Kushina. Naruto slowly turned around in her grip as he felt her warm tears fall on his face. Please, son, please forgive me. Tsunade looked like she was going to rip off her head, but Naruto looked at her, silently telling her to calm down. Tell me, Kushina, with all your begging of forgiveness, you seem to forget a few things. Does your clan know that I am not a demon? Not yet, she whispered. Along with your other children as well? Naruto asked, coldly, shocking the rest of the occupants as they didn't know that Kushina had more children. No, she whimpered. One last thing. Tell me, Kushina, will me forgiving you give me back my virginity? Will it heal the mental and physical scars of being repeatedly raped or erase the horrible vivid nightmares? Will giving you my forgiveness fix me, or do you just need it because you are sure that your husband, the 4th, would rip off your head and piss down your neck if he saw you at this moment? Quote. Kushina couldn't even reply at this point, as she fell on her knees, her grip slipping from Naruto's arms. I thought so. No, Kushina. You will not have my forgiveness, nor will you ever get it. What you did was inexcusable and something that could make Orochimaru puke. You have one chance to disappear from my sight. If you are anywhere near me or those I care for, I swear to every force of nature that is listening, I will destroy you and your clan. And he turned around to face her one last time, and I will enjoy every second as I tear your clan apart, he finished with a hiss, before opening the door and slamming the door shut in her tear-stained face. All of the occupants in the room were silent before Junko broke it by saying, well, Kushina, how does it feel that your son would rather have a psychopath as a mother instead of yourself? Along with the fact that he would rather use you as a sleeve. She chirped with a smile as Kushina's misery tripled as she started bawling, much to Junko's pleasure-filled joy. Barbecue place. All the rookies, minus Hinata, Sakura, and Sasuke, were all sitting in a booth as they picked at their food. We are terrible friends, aren't we? Kiba asked as Akamaru whined. Guys, it can't be that bad. Tenten asked. You weren't there when the Hokage screamed at Kushina, who just so happened to be Naruto's mom, Shikamaru said as he turned green at hearing it that Naruto tried to commit suicide. Tenten, it is really bad. Trust me, if you heard what my dad explained to me, you would look at every civilian like they were mini versions of Orochimaru. The version he gave me was the bare thread, sugar-coated version, and I puked up my guts for 30 minutes, Ino paled. Tenten looked like she was going to be sick as she pushed her plate away from her as she looked at Neji, who had his head down. He remembered several incidents when Naruto came to class with a limp or had bandages on his face, or even coughed up blood. Lee was thinking of Naruto as well as he remembered when he and Naruto were partners for a project. Naruto did most of the work when Lee overworked himself training and Lee got an A for it, while Naruto failed for taking credit for Lee's work. Lee couldn't believe that he didn't speak up for Naruto as he saved his grade, allowing him to be on a team, while Naruto was pushed back 2 years. Lee put his head down as if he couldn't believe how unyouthful he was, but he was just really tired and he never thanked him. We need to make amends. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't want anything to do with us, Shikamaru said. We can at least try, Shika, Choji said. Yeah, but this will be nothing short of troublesome. I have to agree, Kiba said as Akamaru whined on top of his head. Neji, where is Hinata? Shino asked. She is training at the compound, Neji replied with a wince as he remembered her nearly taking off his head when she practicing open palm strikes against a training dummy. We can find him tomorrow and we can all apologize to him, Ino said. If he accepts, that is. Shikamaru said, being pessimistic. Ino gave him a hard elbow to the gut, which caused to fall face first in his plate of ribs as he slowly raised his head, smothered in barbecue sauce, making him the source of laughter. The group then decided to stick with Ino's plan of apologizing later, unaware that they were being watched by a girl with black hair. Forgiveness? Huh, how silly, she thought before leaving the restaurant. Dark cherry. Naruto wore a skin-tight silver sleeveless shirt tucked into black leather pants with black boots as he gave the guard a high five when they allowed him to enter after cutting in line, leaving those outside in shock. The party in the nightclub was in full blast. Music caused the air to vibrate and pulse. People were already dancing the night away as Naruto made his way to the bar, ordering his usual. After finishing his drink, he gave a tip to the bartender and made his way upstairs to see the crowd of people dancing below along with several females blowing kisses and waving at him from the cages. Then 2 pairs of arms wrapped around him, one around his neck, the other around his waist, making him tilt his head back to see both Hinata and Rika in rather revealing outfits. Hinata wore a white mid-thigh length lace dress down to silver stockings and high-heeled wedges. Rika wore a black crop top showing off her midriff down to skin-tight shorts and knee-high boots. Lovely outfits, girls, he said, sultry. Thank you, Naruto-kun, the pair said, moving to face him. Naruto smirked at both girls and then made the hand sign for his signature jutsu and created 2 reinforced clones. Rika smirked and grabbed both clones, pressing them against her and said, "Thank you, dear Naruto-kun. Have fun, you too," she purred, before disappearing in the shadows of the club. Naruto, Hinata. Naruto led Hinata to a massive couch where Hinata was now straddling him as Naruto took her first kiss, making her blush as his hands trailed down her body, squeezing her tits, making her squeak, much to Naruto's amusement. His hands moved down to her slim stomach going down to her hips and then finally gave her butt a good squeeze. Naruto then kissed her cheek, then down her neck and started to on her collarbone. "Tell me, Hinata, do you want me?" he whispered, his hot breath on her skin. "Yes," she whimpered. "You accept me," he said. "I think it should be the other way, Naruto-kun, and yes, I do accept you. Every part of you," she said, kissing him as she mentally prepared himself. "Are you ready?" No, be brutal if you want. Don't hold yourself back, please," she interrupted. Naruto smirked and said, "Of course." He then removed her dress, leaving her bare in a bra and what surprised him, no panties. "No panties, naughty," he purred, much to her blushing face. She smiled at him and pulled at his outfit. "I want this off, now, mister. Whatever you require. My princess," he whispered before stripping himself of his outfit and made to prepare Hinata for him. Hinata moaned when he ed on her skin, ing her nipples, flicking his tongue over them before kissing down her stomach and then reached her flower, making her want to look away, but Naruto told her, "Look at me, Hinata. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Naruto then let his tongue flick over her slit, making her thrust up her hips as he made to on her as he swirled his tongue inside of, thrusting in and out as Hinata moaned as she tangled her hands in his spiky locks as he ate her out. He then pulled his tongue out and pressed his against her and shoved himself inside, causing her to scream into her palm. God, he's so big, she thought. Naruto waited a bit for her to adjust to his size and then started to thrust inside of her, causing her to moan as she grabbed his shoulders as she looked at Naruto and him back at her as he directed his thrusts to find her sweet spot. He found it when Hinata clenched around him with a yell as she shivered in pleasure as she pressed him against her which he started to on as she wrapped her legs around his waist. Yes. 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 God, Naruto, you're so big. I love it and I love you. She said, nearly losing her mind. Trust me, princess, you haven't experienced the best part, yet, Naruto huffed, smirking at Hinata's face, who smiled back as she kissed him as he thrusted faster and faster, bringing her over the edge. Naruto, she yelled, before coming around him, her milking him for everything he had. Hinata, he moaned, before releasing himself inside of her, and the best part was him using a low-powered lightning jutsu on her lower back to make her orgasm 10 times more powerful. Naruto and Hinata were completely still as their orgasms ravaged their bodies. Naruto, that was incredible. He chuckled, making her raise an eyebrow in question. Oh princess, who said this night was over? He finished, giving a large grin. Eep, she squeaked before she began to influenced by pleasure once again as Naruto started the next session. Hours later, Naruto and Hinata basked in the afterglow of their coupling. Hinata nuzzled against him as they laid on a broken couch. Then footsteps came from the left of him and Naruto looked up to see his clone carrying Rika's sleeping form before laying her down next to him before dispelling. She curled up next to him as Naruto looked up at the ceiling with a small smile as he closed his eyes as he pulled a blanket over the three of them as he was lulled into a deep sleep. Had fun, Naruto, a deep voice said as Naruto appeared on a couch in front of a massive fox. Yes, and how is he? Naruto asked. Kyuubi could only laugh as he pointed a tail in the direction of his hall of memories. He should just about be finished with seeing all of them, Naruto said, thinking of when he first saw him. Not the prettiest of reunions if you catch my meaning. And she thinks, I am the demon. Ha, any demon found of harming their own child or any child would be ripped to pieces. We may kill, torture, and maim each other for fun, but hell, at least we take care of our kids. Kyuubi grumbled. Your concern and lovely rant of how she and how most of the human race is lower than shit is ever so pleasing. Naruto mockingly bowed. Of course, now get. I want to sleep some more. The massive fox growled before all that Naruto could hear was the slight breaths of the massive chakra being. Naruto let out a smile and made his way through the corridors of his mind and reached the end, and what was found was a sad sight of a man throwing up everything he has into a trash can. Hello, you poor bastard. How was your trip down my memory lane? Naruto asked as the man who had yet to pull his head out of the trash can. After retching and spitting a couple more times, the man huffed and puffed as he tried to stop his body from shaking. The poor man slowly lifted his head out of the trash can, showing off a head of spiky blonde locks, tan skin although was pale from lack of sun and the horrors he had just witnessed, and dark blue eyes with shadows underneath as if he had seen nothing but nightmares for a year. Naruto. He coughed. Hello, fourth Hokage. Or should I say, father. Naruto quipped.